Yesterday, I did a short piece about Lord Helmer, and while I think he may have used intemperate or foolish, naive language, I think he was also giving quite an important warning. And it's mirrored today by Andrew Bailey's Economic Council and the broader criticism of the right's destructive rhetoric. I think we're at this sort of crossroads. Not merely in terms of economic direction, but of constitutional integrity and international posture. And two voices, these two, Lord Richard Helmer, KC, the Attorney General, and Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England, both of them neither given to bombast, and yet both have issued urgent warnings about pretty well the same thing. Hermer warns against the right's reckless flirtation with treaty breaking, and Bailey warns against the economic self-harm of continued divergence from our largest trading partner, the European Union. And together they form a strange but necessary duet, law and economics united in defence of sanity. And I think it's important that neither is really dismissed, despite the foolishness of Lord Hermer's language. And I point out yesterday how it is actually anchored in good historical reality. He simply shouldn't have invoked the wider context of that history. Bailey's speech in Dublin was not ideological, it was mathematical, it was arithmetic. And since Brexit, the UK's productivity has lagged, non-tariff barriers have throttled our service exports, and our financial sector, once the envy of Europe, now faces friction at every turn. And Bailey didn't say Brexit was wrong. He merely observed with the polite frankness of a civil servant who has run out of euphemisms that it is hurt. And that now, with a change of tone in Downing Street, is something that we should try to minimise. We should try to minimise that pain. And his call to reduce non-tariff barriers was straightforward. Not to rejoin the EU, not even the single market, just to remove pointless bureaucratic obstacles to mutual gain. Financial services, electricity trading, chemical standards, these are not domains of culture war, they are domains of pragmatism. And in Bailey's words, trade is not a one-way street. This is a rare moment of economic common sense, made rarer still by the absurdity of the opposition that it faces. When Bailey spoke in Dublin, Hermer addressed London, and if Bailey's remarks were diplomatic, Hermer's were unmistakably incendiary because they needed to be. They have certainly made a mark. They've certainly attracted attention. I worry about whether or not he will retain his job as a result of this. But the Conservative Party, led by Kemi Badenoch, is now openly toying with withdrawing from the European Convention on Human Rights. This, Hermer says, is not realism, it's naivety verging on vandalism. He doesn't pretend that the convention is perfect, nor does he claim that international institutions are beyond criticism. They're certainly not. But the notion that Britain should prepare to abandon a framework designed to prevent tyranny and enshrine dignity, the very framework authored in the ashes of the Second World War, is, in his words, not simply hopelessly naive, but dangerous. And here he delivers his most powerful line. Such arguments, if ever adopted, would provide succour to Putin. In other words, in our effort to distinguish ourselves from the Kremlin, we should perhaps begin by not mimicking its contempt for international law. So, why this campaign from the right? Why the obsession with confrontation, with Brussels, with Strasbourg, with imaginary bogeymen hiding under every treaty? It is, I think, a theatrical politics of grievance where sovereignty is stripped of substance and deployed as spectacle to make up for the inadequacy of the individuals and their party success. Conservatives now speak of law as an impediment, treaties as shackles, cooperation as capitulation. This is distraction. The real impediment is Kemi Badenoch. The real shackles are not having power. The real cooperation is with a party and a government that's not their side. The European court becomes the enemy. The word alignment is treated as heresy. This is not conservatism. This is scorched earth populism dressed in a Savile Row suit. Have they done enough damage already? Have we? Yes, the answer is yes, they have. Have we not endured the stagnation, the red tape, the diplomatic chill? Yes, Is it truly patriotic to keep pulling bricks from the post-war legal and economic architecture just to hear them crash to the ground? There comes a point where if you pull too many bricks out, the entire edifice crumbles. Both Bailey and Hermer are, in their own way, appealing for maturity. Bailey says we should rebuild our economic relationship with the continent, particularly in financial services, where openness supports growth and investment. Hermer says we must remain within the legal architecture of Europe, not because it's perfect, but because it's preferable to the brute chaos of might over right. We shouldn't try and tear it down. We should try and build it back up so it works. And their joint message is unpretentious. We can reform without retreating, and real sovereignty requires restraint as much as it does freedom. You cannot claim to defend Britain's place in the world while tearing up the very agreements that define it. In the end, I think Hermer is right, despite his foolish language. The law is not a replacement for politics, but neither is politics a license to trample the law. And Bailey is right. Divergence may flatter ideological egos, but it burdens real business. To those on the right who still believe Brexit was a beginning, not an ending, I would say if you truly want Britain to prosper, stop treating Europe as an adversary and start treating it as a neighbour. The language of grown-ups, of restoration, of partnership, of purpose, must now drown the rhetoric of wreckage which has gone on for too many years. Because if we continue like this, the damage will not only continue, but it may become irreversible.